The alien tacticians arrived in a 27-story tactical dropship shaped like a judgmental arrowhead. It hovered just above the Mojave Desert, humming with the menace of over-engineered bureaucracy. Its hull bristled with sensor arrays, war recorders, and a reinforced observation dome designed for maximum disdainful gazing. Inside, the collective high command of the Veldari coalition, an empire built on triple verified protocol and 600-year battle doctrines, prepared to witness what they'd been told was the most effective military indoctrination routine humanity had to offer. They were expecting elegance, precision, symphonic carnage. They got Sergeant Casey Vega. Vega was 39, scowled like she owed it money, and had survived 27 confirmed alien skirmishes through what official reports referred to as tactical noncompliance. She stood on the sand in a sweat-stained tank top, sunglasses that may have been stolen from a dead alien general, and boots held together by spite and field tape. She was leading Drill Bravo 7, the infamous Hell Drill, known on 17 outer colonies as the most chaotic training regimen in the Terran Defense Forces. Today, she was in charge of 60 fresh recruits, 2 flamethrowers, a malfunctioning combat AI named Sparky, and a 4-legged landmine repurposed as a coffee delivery unit. The Veldari tacticians observed silently from the dome, their mental logs syncing with emotion-dampening filters as a precaution. Lieutenant Strategos Kelvarn, who had once rewritten an entire planetary invasion plan because a local tree species offended his sense of symmetry, watched Vega intently. His eyes flickered with tactical overlays. "Where is the command structure?" he asked, his voice low and almost reverent. "She is the command structure," replied his adjutant, filtering through live data streams. "The human protocol describes her as a one-woman hurricane of battlefield education." Kelvarn narrowed his eyes. "Then where is the order of operations? Where are the pre-combat mantras, the soul-anchoring chants?" "She appears to be chewing tobacco and insulting her own recruits' ancestry." Below, Sergeant Vega marched through the sandy assembly like a war goddess on caffeine and borrowed time. "Listen up, you flaccid simulations of meat and regret. Today we learn survival, not survival like Veldari, sit quietly and file risk assessment survival. Real survival, like you're on fire in your left arm, been eaten by a nanoshark, but you still gotta do paperwork survival." One recruit raised a hand. He was promptly shot in the chest with a low-yield paint round. "Wrong first lesson, never volunteer, unless it's for coffee, sex, or orbital sabotage. Second lesson." She kicked over a sandpile, revealing a booby-trapped lunchbox containing 3 grenades and a hamster. The hamster was wearing a miniature helmet. "Always expect the unexpected. Corporal Jenkins, what do you do if an enemy force teleports directly into your spleen?" Jenkins blinked, stammered, then tried to run. Vega tackled him mid-stride, rolled, and somehow ended up sitting on his back while pouring coffee from the landmine canteen hybrid. "Wrong, you assert psychological dominance, make them question reality, ask them how they got inside you, make it weird." In the observation dome, Kelvarn clutched the railing. "This is not a drill, this is a war crime against logic." One of the other tacticians, a younger being named Nariel, whispered, "But the chaos factor, it's off the charts. She's not training them to follow plans, she's training them to break them." "Precisely," said Kelvarn, horror deepening. "They are weaponizing disobedience." Back on the field, things escalated. Vega had split the recruits into teams and armed them with non-lethal riot gear, a half-functioning robot dog, and a live chicken with a tiny GoPro. The mission: capture the enemy flag. The enemy was Vega herself. 5 minutes into the simulation, 4 squads were already on fire. 2 were engaged in a turf war over an abandoned vending machine, and 1 had built a rudimentary airship using nothing but tarps, optimism, and an inflatable mattress. Sergeant Vega had taken the flag and was now ziplining across the canyon via a cable she'd jury-rigged from shoelaces and hubris. A tactical feed piped directly into the Veldari dome lit up with the message: "Human drill ongoing, probability of tactical insight decreasing, probability of existential crisis rising." Kelvarn turned to his peers. This is what defeated the Krillarm swarm in the Nebulan Arc." Nariel nodded slowly. Apparently, she poisoned their leadership using a diplomatic fruit basket and a recipe for space chili. Who is this woman? Below, Vega landed, rolled, and stood with the grace of a drunken panther. She sipped from her canteen. Coffee sloshed. Fireworks went off somewhere in the background. A war song blared from a loudspeaker, though no one was quite sure who'd activated it. It was a mix of polka and screamo. "All right, that's lunch," Vega yelled. "If you survived the morning session, congratulations. You're only mildly disappointing. If you didn't, please return your limbs to the reattachment station and tell Doc Gribble to stop experimenting with synthetic gills indoors." Kelvarn slowly sat down, his thoughts fracturing. "They don't fight wars," he whispered. "They unleash them." Nariel was watching the feed from the helmet cam of the chicken. She's conducting 4 simultaneous debriefings using finger puppets. One of them is depicting the Galactic Accords using a sock named Admiral Bitey. Silence fell over the Tacticians. In the void of structure, the humans had built a crucible of madness. In the death of logic, they'd birthed an unbeatable force. Kelvarn did the only thing he could. He initiated a 10-minute contemplation timeout and silently prayed to the Grand Codex of Tactics for a system reboot. By the time the Veldari tacticians stopped screaming internally, Sergeant Vega had moved the entire drill location 3 kilometers west. No transport. No warning. Just 60 recruits, 2 rogue drones, and 1 commandeered hover tank she'd liberated from a visiting ambassador's motorcade. How she got the keys remained a mystery. The ambassador was still on hold with human resources, trying to lodge a complaint while trapped inside a portable toilet suspended in a tree. The new location was an abandoned Terran film set designed to mimic a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Vega hadn't told anyone it was just a set, and the recruits were now fervently trying to barter canned beans and sharpened toothbrushes with a confused stage actor named Kyle, who had simply shown up for his role as Wasteland Shaman 3 and was now an unwilling warlord. Kelvarn watched the chaos unfold from the dome, his left eye twitching with each strategic irregularity. Why are they looting a broken-down ice cream truck? "It's a resource acquisition simulation, Commander," Nariel offered, nervously adjusting his data visor. "Or perhaps a metaphorical lesson in scarcity. They're using sprinkles as currency. They're adapting." One of the Veldari aides, an elderly war strategist named Ultek, who once destroyed a rebellion by weaponizing tax codes, began muttering to himself and trying to eat his uniform collar. Below, Vega had staged an impromptu ambush drill. The ambushers were 5 volunteers dressed in full-body lizard costumes stolen from the props department. Their mission: eliminate high-value target Bravo, also known as Lieutenant Colonel Meatball, a garden gnome wired with explosives and affectionately referred to by the recruits as Sir Gozeboom. The defenders, caught completely off guard, responded by barricading themselves inside a half-collapsed diner set and launching a counteroffensive via a trebuchet built from a booth, 3 fire extinguishers, and 37 forks. "Launch sequence initiated," someone shouted as a flaming mannequin labeled Plan B arced through the air. It landed directly in front of Vega, who caught it midair, dipped it dramatically like a tango partner, and shouted, "Lesson 3, there is no Plan B is you. Now give me 5 laps and a field-stripped pulse rifle." In the dome, an emergency protocol activated, and Kelvarn had to be restrained from activating the orbital reevaluation beam, a device generally reserved for exterminating heretical moon cults. "This is madness," he growled. "It's working," Nariel whispered, all bleeding into his voice. "They've built a unit-wide trust network in under 20 minutes. Communication, improvisation, morale. They're high-fiving with socks full of gravel." "Yes, unity." Elsewhere, one recruit had duct-taped themselves to a drone and was attempting aerial recon by screaming coordinates as they flew in a wide, screaming spiral. Vega gave them a thumbs up. "See initiative." She turned, clapped her hands, and whistled. The recruits immediately stopped fighting and formed a circle. She walked into the center like a circus ringmaster, eyes hidden behind mirrored lenses that probably didn't qualify as standard issue. "Mid-drill review time. What did we learn?" A recruit raised their hand cautiously. Loud noises fix hesitation. Acceptable. Another spoke. A distraction doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be louder than your enemy's reasoning. Promoted. A third recruit simply barked like a dog and fell over. Improv medic. Vega turned to Sparky, the combat AI that had spent the past hour arguing with a cactus over tactical supremacy. Sparky, Wargame 3, Kingmaker, you have 10 minutes to establish a civilization. Anyone who doesn't have a flag and a functioning currency by then becomes a vassal state, or lunch. Sparky beeped and announced in a cheerful tone, preparing autocratic ascendancy. Within seconds, teams scrambled. One began crafting a constitution from condiment packets and duct tape. Another built a throne from milk crates and threatened their neighbors with interpretive dance warfare. The Veldari tacticians began drafting a formal request to erase this day from their collective memory. Kelvarn stared at a screen showing 3 humans debating the ethical implications of surprise coups via karaoke contests. No rules, he muttered. No framework, just momentum, speed, confusion as a constant. They are water, Naril murmured. Uncontainable, shapeless, potentially caffeinated. Kelvarn glared at him. You're starting to sound inspired. I am. Back on the battlefield, Vega had blindfolded half the recruits and handed them bags of spoons. Your mission is simple, she shouted. Take the enemy fortress. She pointed toward a pile of cardboard boxes guarded by 3 heavily armed mannequins and an actual goat. Wait, one recruit said, peeking under their blindfold. That goat has a knife. Correct, you are now in psychological warfare. The goat charged. Screams followed. The mannequins were knocked over. The recruits declared victory. Vega declared lunch. Kelvarn stood in silence. He was trying to calculate the strategic value of weaponized livestock. The math didn't work. Nothing worked. His entire education, 12 centuries of simulations, battlefield theory, hyperlogic training, was unraveling like a cheap jumpsuit in a gravity well. Vega climbed atop the hover tank, holding the goat like a trophy and addressing her recruits like a warlord mid-TED talk. You did good, you adapted. You made stupid decisions fast enough that the enemy wouldn't know where to aim. That's how you survive. You don't follow plans, you become the storm. One of the recruits coughed, dazed, sand in his mouth. Ma'am, is this standard? She grinned. Son, this is human standard. Anything less is illegal on Tuesdays. Kelvarn turned away from the dome, defeated. They don't simulate war, he whispered. They celebrate it like a drunken festival of disorder. Their drills are nightmares. Their doctrine is an insult, and I am terrified. Nariel watched the last moments of the drill play out as Vega handed the knife-wielding goat a small medal. I think I'm in love, he said softly. Kelvarn did not respond. He was busy drafting his resignation letter in the ancient, sacred format of Veldari shame poetry. And Sergeant Vega, she was already planning the next exercise. It would involve a trebuchet, 30 packets of mustard, and a working knowledge of interpretive mime. By the 3rd day, the Veldari tacticians had stopped referring to the event as a drill. Internally, their mission logs now called it Human Indoctrination Ritual, Category Delta, Omega, Controlled Cataclysm Simulation. Kelvarn had suggested simply labeling it, the incident, and filing it under cultural quarantine. He was ignored, mostly because his last 7 communiques had been written entirely in existential screeches and crude stick-figure diagrams of Sergeant Vega setting fire to concepts. Meanwhile, Vega had relocated Drill Bravo 7 again. This time to a defunct orbital junkyard circling Earth at a leisurely 28,000 kilometers per hour. How did they even get up there? Naril asked, staring in muted awe as Vega and her recruits sprinted along the shattered hulls of decommissioned satellites, playing some kind of zero-gravity capture-the-flag-meets theater exercise. Kelvarn didn't look up from the manifesto he was carving into the wall of the dome with a stylus. Stop asking how. The answer is always Vega. And she was, in fact, floating backward through a cloud of micro-debris, shouting instructions through a bullhorn duct-taped to her helmet. Recruits, rule one of orbital combat. No one cares about Newton's third law unless it slaps you in the face. Rule 2, debris is just a problem you haven't turned into a weapon. Rule 3, if you lose your orientation, scream louder than the void. One of the recruits tumbled by in an old communications dish, pinging off a nearby antenna and spinning away with a victory salute. Vega gave him a double thumbs up. The Veldari observation dome had to enable 10 new AI firewalls just to process the feed without going into diagnostic convulsions. I believe they've reinvented boarding tactics using antique VCRs and a repurposed espresso machine, Naril reported, blinking in disbelief as a group of recruits magnetically latched to the hull of a Russian-era weather satellite and began slinging plastic tubing at one another like combat noodles. "That's not training," Kelvarn muttered. "That's interpretive anarchy." But even he had to admit that somehow, impossibly, the recruits were becoming better. They anticipated chaos. They thrived in it. There were no formations, no structured battle lines, just bursts of collaboration emerging from total disorder like predatory jazz. The turning point came when Vega declared war on a passing maintenance bot convoy. She didn't announce it. She just hijacked one of their units, drew a face on it with lipstick, named it Captain Clank, and declared it an enemy agent of the Toaster Uprising. The other bots, naturally following a strict peacetime subroutine, responded with escalating confusion. Vega countered by broadcasting ancient Earth sitcoms at them until their logic buffers overloaded. She then taught 2 recruits to ride the lead maintenance frame like a mechanical bull and steer it using rhythmic insults. The bots surrendered within 13 minutes. Kelvarn watched in horror as Vega planted a flag made of bedsheets and spaghetti on a satellite dish and declared the junkyard, New Earth Prime III, Electric Boogaloo. "Are we at war with our own trash?" he asked. "No," Naril whispered. "They're at peace with it, which is worse." Down in the simulation, or perhaps up, given the inconsistent gravity, Vega initiated the next phase, survival trials. Each squad was given a random assortment of tools. One group got a fusion welder and a balloon animal kit. Another had a grappling hook and a harmonica. A third was armed with only confidence and a 6-foot tuna sculpture of unknown origin. The challenge: infiltrate the Fortress of Quiet Judgment, also known as the Observation Dome. Kelvarn paled as he read the alert. "They're coming here. This is a military observation platform, not a training ground." "Correct," said Naril, as a tuna-shaped silhouette approached the hull with terrifying velocity. "And I think they're going for the south airlock. They can't breach a reinforced." The wall exploded. Through the smoke and emergency foam drifted Vega, arms crossed, flanked by 3 recruits in feathered capes and one wielding a stolen mop. "Veldari Tacticians," she declared, doing a slow somersault and kicking a fire extinguisher into orbit. "This was a test of your perimeter integrity and your sense of humor. You failed both." Naril rose instinctively. "This is a classified command zone." "And now it's a teaching moment," she said, producing a dry erase board from nowhere. "Lesson: if your opponent doesn't know what you're doing, it's chaos. If you don't know what you're doing and still win, it's art." Kelvarn stood, trembling, trying to form a coherent sentence. "You breached our sanctum. You labeled it Fortress of Quiet Judgment on your own thermal map. I couldn't not. Explain the fish." She gestured dramatically. "Symbol of territorial conquest, also a hat. We're still debating." Recruits began pouring through the breach, establishing makeshift outposts in the control room using snack wrappers and motivational posters. Naril muttered, "They've taken over our systems with positive reinforcement." A chime sounded. Vega held up a tiny medal engraved with a poorly drawn star and a smirking stick figure holding a grenade. "Congratulations, you're all honorary graduates of Bravo 7's Improvisational Diplomacy Through Forceful Friendship course." "This is not protocol," Kelvarn howled. "And that's why you keep losing to us," Vega replied, removing his tactical visor and placing a sticky note that said "Hug More" on his forehead. "You still think victory comes from structure. We know it comes from momentum, from audacity, from punching a problem in the jaw before it asks you to fill out a form. A siren blared as the dome's integrity system tried and failed to restore order. Nariel sat down amid the chaos and sighed. I used to believe we were the most advanced species in the galaxy. We are, Kelvarn said hollowly, until they show up. Vega pointed to the recruits, now attempting to form a conga line in zero-G. You're welcome to join, she said. First rule of Heldril, everyone dances or no one graduates. Somewhere in the Cygnus fringe, the most sacred relic of the Veldari military floated in silence, the Ark of Tactical Purity. Encased in anti-tamper fields, surrounded by a ring of autonomous defense drones, and hidden within the orbit of a Class 3 microsingularity, it had not been accessed in over 1,000 years. It contained the original doctrinal codices, 16 volumes of pure, unfiltered combat logic, bound in ceremonial resin and written in a language so structured it could only be spoken while holding one's breath and doing algebra. The humans found it by accident. More precisely, Sergeant Vega launched it into a live simulation as a surprise boss battle, after mistaking the security satellite guarding it for a defunct smoothie kiosk. I thought it said smoothie cannon, Vega explained over the comms, as she and her recruits fled a barrage of sacred defense lasers in an impromptu escape pod built out of discarded arcade machines and parts from an old fusion fryer. And if you're gonna install sacred relics, maybe label them with something other than Latin and dread. Inside the observation dome, now partially rebranded as Fort Bravo and decorated with glow-in-the-dark stickers and a disco ball, the Veldari tacticians watched the horror unfold. Kelvarn's eye twitched so violently it began syncing with emergency broadcast frequencies. She has weaponized blasphemy. They're trying to bargain with the drones, Nariel whispered, using a karaoke challenge. On the Relic's security feeds, one of the recruits was currently singing Don't Stop Believin' to a fleet of AI guardians while dressed in a full astronaut chicken suit. Another was translating the lyrics into binary semaphore using flares and an extremely flexible spine. Why aren't the drones retaliating? Kelvarn shouted. They're conflicted, Nariel said, emotionally compromised. The rhythm, the power ballad modulation, they're confused. The drones are weeping, sir, a technician confirmed, holding up a data pad, requesting time to process what they call the forbidden groove. Elsewhere, Vega executed a mid-air somersault while manually disabling a grav stabilizer with a hammer labeled Plan A-ish. All right, Heldril, you're doing amazing. We've disabled one religious symbol, emotionally compromised an ancient defense network, and introduced sonic warfare to a post-doctrinal war cult. That's at least 3 objectives down, and I haven't even had lunch. A recruit wheezed over the comms. Ma'am, was this part of the drill? Everything's part of the drill if you drill hard enough, Vega replied. The Ark, now detached from its containment harness and slowly spiraling toward the microsingularity, emitted a distress ping directly into Veldari High Command. Within seconds, an entire warfleet was mobilized, 3 Grand Theorists were revived from cryo-storage, and the sacred tribunal of tactical sanctity was summoned from retirement on the moon of bureaucratic regret. Kelvarn, watching from the dome, received a transmission containing precisely 4 words. What have you done? He simply turned the screen around, showing Vega power sliding across the hull of the Ark while dual-wielding plasma torches and screaming, tactical redefinition. The tribunal replied with the ancient Veldari phrase for, we're so boned. She's not even destroying it, Nariel murmured, watching as the recruits attached party balloons to the Ark and began painting it with motivational slogans. She's repurposing it. They're turning the Ark into a school bus, another tactician whispered in despair. Indeed, the words field trip to victory now adorned the side of the Ark, alongside a crudely drawn mustache on the engraved face of General Veldar himself, the founder of the coalition. Vega activated the ship-wide broadcast. Attention, Veldari observers, you are witnessing the evolution of doctrine. Today's lesson, sacred relics are just highly flammable opportunities. One of the drones drifted closer, confused and possibly inspired. A recruit offered it a sticker shaped like a sandwich and welcomed it to Team Spicy Diplomacy. Kelvarn dropped his datapad. They're converting our own relics into motivational mascots. Nariel exhaled. She just made your holy strategy codex into a lesson plan, and honestly, I think it's working. And it was. Despite or because of the madness, the recruits were operating at peak efficiency. They navigated chaos as though born in it. Their teamwork emerged from the pressure cooker of nonsense Vega had engineered, and somehow, impossibly, they were winning. The simulation had spiraled into a no-rules, multi-front engagement involving sacred AI, unstable gravity fields, and something called Operation Sticky Raptor. And yet, they adapted faster than any Veldari cadet in recorded history. Vega redirected their momentum toward the singularity, treating it as a lesson in gravitational diplomacy. "Ma'am, we're headed toward certain annihilation," one recruit said. "Excellent, nothing teaches better than consequence. Pull a hard burn and slingshot around that sucker. We're going to negotiate orbital dominance." She strapped herself into a command chair made of 3 lunch trays, and a seatbelt she swore was from the Apollo program. "We're going in." The Ark, newly christened the USS Improvisation Nation, looped around the black hole with an audacity that broke 3 known laws of celestial conduct and narrowly missed colliding with a fleet of incoming Veldari warships, who promptly lost tracking due to a barrage of chaff composed entirely of glitter and used ration packs. By the time the dust settled, Vega and her recruits were lounging in the ruins of a forgotten Veldari training outpost on a nearby asteroid, roasting synthetic marshmallows over a plasma exhaust and telling ghost stories about bureaucrats. Nariel watched the latest feed, slack-jawed. She looped the Ark around a black hole, survived, emotionally compromised our sacred AI, and used the maneuver to steal tactical data from a dreadnought. Kelvarn nodded, dead-eyed. She also replaced their national anthem with a remix of Baby Shark and filed the paperwork for Veldari cultural annexation using crayons and explosive glue. "I think," Nariel whispered, "she just trained the most effective unit in Terran history. They'll win every battle. They'll break every rule. They'll destroy every handbook. They're beautiful." Kelvarn stood slowly, lit a ceremonial resignation incense stick, and watched it fizzle into ash. The Intergalactic Tactical Symposium was held once every century aboard the Hexacrypt Citadel, a mobile station the size of a small moon and shaped like a 6-sided die loaded with dread. Attendance was mandatory for every major military civilization in the galaxy. Strategies were exchanged. Wars were simulated. Elites strutted like heavily armored peacocks through corridors lined with gold leaf emergency escape hatches. It was where civilizations flaunted their greatest minds and politely threatened each other using passive-aggressive PowerPoint slides. And now Sergeant Casey Vega had been invited to give a keynote speech. The moment her name appeared on the guest list, 3-star empires downgraded their alert status from cautious to terrified, and one species attempted to self-exile into another dimension. Veldari High Command, in full damage control mode, deployed Kelvarn and Nariel to intercept her at the docking bay. They wore ceremonial robes, carried ornate protest scrolls, and were both very aware it would accomplish nothing. Vega stepped off the stolen shuttle she'd retrofitted into a mobile taco stand, wearing a suit of battle-scarred armor, flip-flops, and a lanyard that read guest speaker, Chaos EMBODID. Behind her marched 12 of her Bravo 7 recruits, now fully accredited field operatives and collectively banned from 5 continents for excessive creativity. Kelvarn tried diplomacy. "You cannot speak here. This is sacred ground." She handed him a burrito. "You're gonna want carbs. It's gonna get loud." Nariel peeked behind her. "Is that a jet-powered podium?" "Built it myself," Vega said proudly. "Also functions as an escape vehicle and smoothie blender, multitask or die." She strolled past them and into the symposium hall, where thousands of tacticians, generals, and sentient war algorithms had gathered, each expecting another round of doctrinal backpatting. Instead, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the stage. The podium revved. Vega stepped up, took a deep breath, and yelled, Tactics are dead. Silence. Kelvarn inhaled sharply through his nose. Vega leaned into the mic. I mean traditional tactics, the kind you all drool over in war libraries and sim bunkers. The ones where you spend 5 weeks analyzing a flank maneuver while your enemy dropkicks your command center through a wormhole. Several gasps, one nervous laugh. You think winning is about structure. It's not. It's about disruption. About making your enemy spend so much time wondering what the hell just happened that they forget what their own plan was. That's the human advantage. We don't outgun, we outweird. She slapped a button on the podium. A hologram of a Bravo 7 drill lit up the room. Recruits engaging in a firefight while juggling, blindfolded, upside down, through a simulated nightclub. Tell me your top-tier infantry unit would be ready for this. A silence thicker than neutron paste settled over the crowd. Vega continued. We teach our soldiers to survive by removing the idea of normal. If your battle plan works only when things go right, it's already trash. Bravo 7 trains for when everything explodes, your socks are on fire, and the enemy speaks exclusively in interpretive sneeze. An enormous Veldari general stood up. That's not strategy, that's absurdity. Absurdity works, Vega snapped. Because nobody plans for it, because you can't game theory a lunatic with a stapler and a vendetta. Another button press. Footage played of a Bravo 7 squad capturing an enemy base using a smoke bomb, synchronized kazoo music, and a dance routine based on forgotten Terran memes. The room fell apart. Some laughed hysterically, some wept. A few AI processors fried midstream trying to rationalize what they'd seen. Vega spread her arms. You all treat unpredictability like a flaw. I make it my doctrine. I trained a goat to disarm minds with interpretive hoofwork. I had a guy take down a walker mech using a grappling hook and an inflatable dinosaur costume. I beat a Kragari warlord in single combat with a beach umbrella. A delegate from the Kragari Empire stood up and clapped solemnly. Thank you, Rip Talon, Vega said with a nod. Still got your femur, by the way, makes a great coat rack. More delegates clapped. Some of them rose to their feet. Nariel watched in disbelief as cultures long divided by millennia of warfare began sharing stories of their own ridiculous victories. A Martakian chieftain spoke of defeating a cyberplague by overloading it with knock-knock jokes. A Xylat strategist admitted their best general was an unlicensed therapist with rocket boots. Vega had kicked open the floodgates. Chaos wasn't just a human trait. It was universal, just buried beneath centuries of seriousness. Even Kelvarn stood there, stunned, as delegates lined up to request cooperation drills, Bravo 7 guest instructors, and in one case, Vega's autograph on their species, declaration of war. Later, as the symposium descended into a full-blown party, Vega's recruits had already reprogrammed the fire suppression system to dispense confetti. Kelvarn approached her. He stared at her for a long moment. You broke everything we believed in. Correction, she said, sipping a neon drink from a grenade-shaped mug. I showed you it was already broken. He looked around. A Martakian and a Veldari were trying to outdo each other with impromptu limbo combat drills. One Bravo 7 recruit was hosting a tactical fashion show using armor made of snack wrappers and instinct. What happens now? He asked. Vega smiled, wolfish and unrepentant. Now, she stepped into the crowd, raising her drink. Now we rewrite the rules. Nariel appeared at Kelvarn's side, still dazed. She's created a movement. She's created a contagion, Kelvarn said. Do we stop it? Kelvarn watched as 4 Veldari junior officers practiced dodgeball warfare while singing old Earth sea shanties. No, he said finally, we adapt or we get left behind. Above them, the words Tactical Anarchy 101, Live Workshop, lit up on the main display. Vega had taken the stage again, spinning a whiteboard marker like a blade. She grinned. Let's begin with flanking via interpretive dance. The crowd roared. And somewhere in the cold vacuum of space, A sacred Veldari satellite exploded, not from weapons fire, but from an unauthorized broadcast of Bravo 7's training anthem played on loop by a goat DJ named Cluckles. Humanity had not just taught the galaxy a new way to fight. They taught it to improvise.